of a diverse network of communities, community organizations, NGOs, artists, labor unions, and concerned individuals from Toronto and the surrounding area that are joining together to oppose these undemocratic meetings of the G8 and G20.
We're fighting the G8 and G20 this year as part of our campaign because it represents the richest people in the world and their governments, including Canada's.
Queer people, trans folk, people of color, Indigenous and differently able people are exploited on a daily basis by the same dominant forces that exploit people's labors, the land, and the environment.
We are being told by homeless people that the cops are telling them that the G20 is coming and that we'll be watching.
The G20 summit in Toronto will create checkpoints in the city. It will create borders that divide our city, and it will show the true face of global apartheid.
Next month, what is going to happen is that a collection of some of the most violent and dangerous people on the face of the planet are going to come to Toronto, where they're going to be provided with an armed camp out of which they can hold deliberations on how they can further their agenda of precisely making income more inequitable throughout the planet on an enormous scale.
The federal government is trying to solve these issues by promoting market-based solutions, but it's these markets that cause the problems in the first place.
If we look at what is happening to Greece and to poor people in Greece, we can see that the conditions for solving the crisis are going to be imposed on poor and working people.
Women and trans people around the world want peace and an end to male violence of all kinds, from the violence in their homes, workplaces, and in public spaces, to the violence caused by war, occupation, and exploitation of all kinds. The interests of big business and banks are protected at the expense of social and economic supports worldwide.
We're receiving reports of police officers in the downtown east going to stores with trespass letters that they want signed so that they will have the power to remove people that they deem removable when the time comes.
So when the G20 does come in, I think it's really important for the public to know that we will be joining forces, and we'll be joining forces in terms of the awareness.
And we also have within Canada now a government that is attempting to muzzle the freedom of expression of Canadians on many issues, international issues and domestic issues.
In Canada, at least 580 Indigenous women have been reported missing and/or have been murdered over the last 30 years with absolutely no effective outcry or response from provincial and national leaders.
Canada must stop forced psychiatric treatment and forced institutionalization and imprisonment and incarceration of disabled people and people affected by ableism.
Our message to you, the media, and to the Canadian public is that you give space to these concerns and these questions, that you not only approach the G8 and G20 summit from a quote-unquote security perspective, but that you probe some of the questions and concerns that we're bringing up in this forum, and also to ask why is there a militarized zone and checkpoints in Toronto coming in June during the G8, G20 summit?
Because we collectively have to ensure that we make these governments who are in place accountable.
We refuse to sit idly by and let a handful of rich men in suits come to our city, take it over, and make decisions about the things that impact our lives.
We will shout the fuck up, not shut the fuck up.
We want to contribute to building a world in which the agenda of the G20 and everything it stands for is defeated.
Now I'd like to invite Leslie Wood, spokesperson for the Toronto Community Mobilization Network, who will answer any questions.
John, you were saying earlier that the police are moving homeless people off the streets?
The concrete evidence that I was advancing was, at this point, as they say, anecdotal. Also, we've received reports in the territory of the 51 Division of officers going to stores with trespass letters that they want signed by the store owners. A trespass letter basically will authorize the police to selectively remove people.
Is there any kind of communication taking place between any of these organizations in terms of trying to avoid any violence in any way?
We're working together in order to create an opportunity for people who want a more peaceful world, more just world, and a more sustainable world. We're not going to be talking about tactics today.
What did you think of what happened in Ottawa 2 days ago?
We're not going to be talking about tactics. What our goal is here for this press conference is to talk about the issues, how they're connected, and why people are resisting the G20 and the G8.
Do you anticipate violence?
I have no idea what's going to happen there, but what we're here is to talk about the issues. Overall, I think the network wants to show that the G20 and the G8 are illegitimate bodies that are incompetent at managing the global economy. They're not democratic, And really what we want is a world where there's real justice.
What is your message to the many in Toronto, particularly those that live and work downtown, that are worried and scared about violence breaking out during this event? I mean, what do you say to those people?
We say, we didn't want this to come to the city. This was not an invitation from the people of Toronto to the G20.
You're not going to say, don't worry, we're going to do our best to stop any violence that may break out. You're not
We're not
going
to be talking about tactics.
People in Toronto residents are concerned about violence. They should talk to the police who murdered 2 people in the past month.
That's right.
And they should talk with each other and think about the kind of violence that's happening around them.
What about the fire at the bank in Ottawa?
A bomb in a bank will be fixed. The damage will be fixed in about a month. The damage to women's lives that happens in this city, in this province, in this country, and around the world every day will be with us for generations.
John, I just get the sense everybody's dancing around this issue. You don't want to talk about tactics. You've been on the front lines. You know what happens. Let's not be naive here.
If you are going to impose this poverty and misery on people throughout this planet, don't think that you're going to be able to ask them to confine themselves to sedate, nice, polite methods of struggle. People, by God, are going to resist, and they have a damn right to.
Violent action, then. It almost sounds like you would support that.
A lot of control over what the message out of this summit is in your hands, the media's hands. And if you remain obsessed with protesters' violence, then indeed that will be the message that comes out of this summit.
What happens after the G20 meetings? Do you continue as an organization? Because obviously these issues aren't going to be solved by the end of June.
We have no plans to be an ongoing formal network, but definitely the ties that we're building between issues, between people in this city are going to be present.
I can't comment on the tactics that people will use. Certainly when we think about violence, I hope that the police are not violent. Historically, we know that they've had sonar cannons, they've had tear gas, they've had pepper spray, they've had rows upon rows of riot police that have been very violent to peaceful protesters, and I certainly hope that we don't see that kind of violence.
Most Canadians are, would certainly oppose this if they became aware of the purpose of this conference that's taking place in June by the G20.
For real, and we got the G20 coming into Toronto, and I've heard that there's going to be some extreme security precautions. Parts of downtown will be closed down. Are you at all concerned about the security?
My concern is that, you know, we are becoming more and more sort of a militarized police country. We are spending $6 billion on security agencies in Canada. We are increasing the number of policemen, increasing the number of jails, while at the same time, you know, there's a rise in poverty and a decrease in services to the population. So this is what really concerns me. We are here spending money now to protect these people who are planning how to cause more destruction and death, and this is unacceptable. This is it's a shame that we have reached a situation like that in Canada.
Rather than supporting maternal and child health, we see the actions not just of the Harper government, but of many, many governments actually actively undermining maternal and child health, and we want to expose that lie.
There's been some mentioning that that there had been agents that had been coming into the community mobilization meetings. Had you heard of this at all, or?
No, I hadn't heard about that. But again, I would not be surprised by that. I've been involved in organizing efforts for a very long time, and one of the first demos I remember was in response to the bathhouse raids back in 1981. And at that demo, right at the front, were police agents holding onto a banner, ready to cause trouble. Happened again in 2001 during the OCAP rally at Queen's Park. It's happened over and over again. So yes, I think that it's expected whenever you do a public call out that it's quite likely that members of the Integrated Security Unit might be there, or members of the police.
We need to make sure that we remain a country that stands for peace and justice, and not one that perpetuates wars, inequalities, and oppression around the world.